Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the first webinar of the Public-Private Partnership Initiative for anticipating fast disease outbreaks. Fast diseases are foot and mouth disease and similar transboundary diseases. The Public-Private Partnership Initiative has started in 2019 and gathers 8 EU private partners in livestock production. And this initiative is supported by the EuFMD. So the partners which are now in the initiative are Animal Health Europe, the European Farmers and Agri Cooperatives, Copa Cogeca, the European Fed Processor and Rendering Association, the European Feed Manufacturers Federation, the European Forum for Farm Animal Breeders, the European Livestock and Meat Trader Union, la Fédération Européenne pour la Santé Animale et la Sécurité Sanitaire, it's a tough one, FESAS, and then last but not least, the Federation of the Veterinary Europeans. So the initiative started in 2019, and the private stakeholders actually invite their public stakeholder and academia partners to explore a collaboration in addressing animal health management in a structured and open discussion. And in this context, we will support also that from EuFMD to bring a number of webinars, workshops, simulation exercises in the next years to establish that. So this first webinar is on success stories on livestock production, on public-private partnerships in livestock production and animal health in Europe, and also other parts of the world. And we welcome 5 distinguished guests to do so. We have Isabelle Dieuzy-Labey from OIE. Welcome, Isabelle. We have Raymond Briscoe from Afghanistan, all the way there. We have Piet van Tensen from Belgium, Jens Munk-Ebbesen from Denmark, and David Graham from Ireland. So they all will explore their experiences with public-private partnerships and how these were successful. With this webinar, we want to identify the drivers and the levers of the success and how this can be explored for future collaborations in the context of fast disease outbreaks management. On the practical side, this is a webinar setup, so you as a participant, as audience will not be able to speak or use your camera. So, but please use the Q&A section in this Zoom application, which is right at the bottom of your screen, to pose your questions to the panelists and also to provide questions to the debate, which will take place at the end of the seminar. So the debate will close all the presentations. There will not be answers to questions between the presentations. And so in that debate, your questions will be addressed. The webinar will be recorded and shared after the live session to all of you so you can review it to your comfort. It is my pleasure to give the floor to Fabrizio Rosso, the Deputy Secretary General of the EuFMD, to provide a few opening remarks. Fabrizio, please go ahead.
Thank you, Koen, and good morning, afternoon, and good evening also from my side, and welcome to the webinar, which, as Koen explained, is organized as part of the initiatives to facilitate the discussion and explore collaborations between private and public partners and academia in addressing animal health management, improve preparedness, prevention, and control of FMD and similar transboundary animal diseases, so-called fast diseases. And I think that the establishment of a discussion fora between private and public stakeholders can actually facilitate and promote the engagement of different partners from competent authorities, farmers, veterinary professionals, industry, and other categories to share responsibilities and ownership in prevention and control of fast diseases. And the collaborations between multiple sectors can in fact bring new solutions to animal health issues and identify also win-win opportunities for public and private stakeholders. There are different issues for which contribution from public and private sectors should be considered in the prevention and control of fast diseases in Europe and also in other regions, such as, for example, the impact of good husbandry practices and biosecurity in livestock production, and specifically in enabling business continuity during outbreaks, the criteria for application of emergency vaccination, or the availability of resources in proper time, considering human resources, diagnostics, or quality vaccines, or also the rendering capacities for an efficient fast disease outbreak control, or, for example, the application of the compartmentalization concept. So I really hope that this initiative can be useful to explore the potential value of PPP in principle and in specific cases, and also to build trust between public sector and potential partners. But also, I hope that can contribute to create a positive culture to PPP while sharing concerns and challenges of disease control. And this can, in fact, lead to improve future legislation and contingency planning, and also to raise awareness among the private sector. So I would like to thank particularly Koen for the work he's doing in supporting the part of the EuFMD work plan aimed at facilitating and establishing public-private discussion platform, and also other initiatives to increase the collaboration and engagement of the private sectors in the prevention and control of fast diseases. I equally would like to thank the EuFMD technical team, Elena, Tiziano, and Filippo, for assisting in the preparation of the webinar, and the different speakers that will share their experiences of successful PPPs in livestock production and animal health that can serve as example. And finally, I would like to congratulate also the 8 private partners that Koen just mentioned, the private partners in livestock production, in taking the initiative with a very positive approach, providing a lot of contributions. And I really look forward to a long-standing collaboration. And I wish you all a very good and fruitful webinar. Thank you. Back to you, Koen.
Thank you, Fabrizio. This brings us directly in line with the first presentation. This will be by Isabelle Dieuzy-Labet. She's a senior animal advisor in partnerships at the World Organization for Animal Health, the OIE. She has over 20 years of international experience in animal health, mostly in private industry, but also working on a range of topics, including animal health, public-private partnerships, and innovation with impact. Isabelle is a trustee at the NGO GulfMed, and she's a board member of the École Nationale Vétérinaire d'Alfort and at the Morden Research Institute in Scotland. She's also part of the scientific council of the Animal Health Department of INRA, and she is a veterinarian with an MBA from INSEAD. Isabelle, please go ahead on providing insights on the role of OIE in the support of public-private partnerships. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Koen, for this introduction, and good day to everybody. I'm not saying good morning or good afternoon because I don't know where exactly you're located, but certainly please all have a good day. I assume that you can all see my presentation at this point in time, so I'll go ahead, and if not, please shout. But I'm really delighted to come and present the work we've done at the OIE on public-private partnership in the last 3-4 years, and which is going on and continuing. I'm particularly glad that this is a private initiative that that this meeting is taking place in. And want to salute the work that is being done by the private partners, really to open up the dialogue. The OIE has more of a reach with the public sector, So it's good that we can reach out to each other and collaborate as much as possible to promote PPPs. So delighted to hear about the success stories, because as you will see, this is where we all started in the OIE. We started with success stories from our members. So I'll come back to that. And I think I heard Fabrizio say very important words in my mind and in my experience with PPP at the OIE, which is trust and culture and shared interest. I think shared interest between public and private sector is what will motivate the PPPs to happen. But the limits, we need to be conscious, is definitely on the side of trust and culture. Having worked myself primarily in the private sector, I can see, that there is distrust on the private side sometimes, and there is also distrust from the public side for the private partners. So I hope we will contribute to making things happen. And with that, I will jump into the presentation. I understand these presentation will be made available to all who are interested, which is great because it allows me to go quick on some parts and to let my colleagues who will speak about the success stories in the field speak, because I think that's where things begin, in real cases and real experiences that show the success and only ask to be expanded. So just a few words, because some of you might not be super familiar with OIE. It's the intergovernmental organization responsible for improving animal health worldwide. We are considered as the reference organization by WTO for a lot of the trade norms and standards allowing exchange of animal products over the world. And we have 182 members, so we are covering pretty much the world. Where the PPP element is happening is in the fact that one of our key strategic priorities is to ensure the capacity and sustainability of veterinary services in the field. So PPP is one element to strengthen these services. And we started the initiative in 2016 with the support of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the collaboration of a number of partners, including academic partners like CIRAD, and also partners like EuFMD, with whom we have collaborated very fruitfully for a few years already. And the objective really for OIE is not to impose anything, not to say that PPP is the thing that will solve all the issue, but just to present it as another mean to strengthen vet services in the field. And we want to support our member to develop, if and when relevant, those partnerships with impact. So this is my only busy slide. So I want to just warn you that you should not necessarily read it all, but I wanted on one place to show you the tools that the OIE is providing to you to help you set up PPP in the field. And it started in 2017 with a resolution. For those of you who are not too familiar, it's kind of a formal text that is adopted at the general session of the OIE, which happens every year. And it means that this resolution in favor of PPP in the veterinary domain can be a door opener for those private organizations who are willing to knock at the door of the public sector and try and do more PPP in the veterinary domain. So it's a formal text. I'll show you very briefly what it looks like. Nothing very appealing necessarily, but certainly it's important to know it's there because it's an engagement from the countries that this is being supported. We did a survey, as I said, with success stories. We asked our members, do you have any experience to share in the veterinary services field of PPPs that have been successful? And we got around 100 success stories. So from that, we did a typology, which some of you may have seen in the literature. We've published it in PLOS ONE. We've published it in a number of places, or spoken about it in a number of places. And we've made it the basis of some of the guidelines and supporting elements that I will show you later. We also started an expert consultation. Some of the people in this room or in this virtual room today. We're part of this consultation, like my friend Raymond, who is going to speak just after me. And we invited 42 public and private experts to talk about what they have seen in the survey and in the field also, in terms of the key success factor to succeed in PPPs. And we've started also impact assessment on some of the cases, because we are very conscious that as much as public people need advocacy elements with their ministers or people to support PPP at the top level in the country, you in the private sector also need to justify or to advocate for reaching out to the public sector and for doing PPP to your manager, your CEOs, your shareholders, and convince them that, hey, it might take a little bit of time, it might be an investment, but it's a worthwhile investment. And in 2019, we produced a number of tools, the OIE PPP handbook, which is a kind of a list or a book which has the list of key success factors and best practices with regard to PPP. So it's in the hands of all the members of the OIE, and it's available to anybody. We did e-learning module with EuFMD. I'll come back to it. We did regional workshops in Asia and Africa. We reached out to over 200 public and private participants in 35 countries. We are doing numerous presentations. Interestingly, I think the current sanitary crisis with COVID-19 is really showing how public and private can solve issues together. And it also points out to the fact that if you can prepare it in advance, it's probably smarter than doing it in the middle of the crisis. So it's good support for PPP anticipation. And we are doing a lot in terms of integrating also the PPP in all the OIE PVS pathway tools, and PVS stands for the performance of vet services. We have tools to support it with our members, and we are integrating PPP into this. And we've done several publications, including a panorama on PPP. So this is a long list. I apologize for this busy slide again, but this is just to show you that if you are interested in PPP and wish to reach out to the public sector in particular, there is a number of supporting elements. I mean, it's also available to the private sector, but interestingly, the OIE reaches out more easily to the public sector, because this is our normal clients, if I can say. So I'll go quickly into the illustration of what I just presented. This is the resolution. This is how it looks like. Again, nothing very fancy, but if you look in number 5, for example, you will say that in this resolution, the member countries have agreed to take stock of the best practices identified by the OIE and to promote, develop, and implement policies and legislation to incentivize collaboration with the private sector to improve animal health and livestock sector development. So it's important because this is the kind of thing on which you can rely. It has been adopted by 182 countries to really push for the right environment, enabling environment, but also the right support at public level. So this is the more nice looking stuff. The brochures we've done, we've tried and make it as marketing attractive as possible on, how public-private partnership can strengthen the capacities of national vet services. So we've done a number of tools which you can find on the OIE website. We've done the handbook, and I give you here the address where you can find it, print it, do whatever you want with it, because it's really available and for you. And we've done 2 courses with EuFMD, one which is a 1-hour course on introducing PPP and the value of PPP in animal health, and taking a lot of examples. We have videos of different partners and private and public partners that we have in the field. And the second e-learning that we've done has been used quite a lot by EuFMD, and we have imagined a country called Zooland, in which there is a number of problems with FMD, and we are showing how PPP can help improve the situation. It's true with FMD, but it's true with many other diseases. ASF, influenza, and many other diseases could be also targeted in this kind of course. But in general, transboundary animal disease are the topic here. I spoke about the panorama, which is a a publication of the OIE where you can see a number of our partners have collaborated and volunteered some presentations and some articles. Of course, academic partners like CIRAD and ILRI, EuFMD, WTO, STDF, which is a standard and trade development framework. We also have the Gates Foundation, obviously, the World Bank, USAID, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, the African Development Bank, Health for Animal, which is the Association of Pharmaceutical Industries worldwide, International Dairy Federation, and many others who contributed to this publication. And as I said, and I'll go quickly on this, it's not my purpose to present you the PVS pathway, but it's a flagship program of the OIE where we support countries upon their request to strengthen their vet services. And as you can see, public-private partnership is now a fully integral part of this. So this is to say that PPP is to be supported by the OIE for a long time. It's part of the DNA of the OIE now. Now, before I let my colleagues who will present the cases in the fields, I will just quickly tell you what we've done with these success stories we gathered in 2017. We've done a typology which showcase the main types of PPPs that you can encounter in the veterinary domain. I will not go because I don't have the time to go in all the details, but we have identified three main types. The first one is with private veterinarians or vet paraprofessionals, sometimes community animal health worker, and they agree to collaborate with the public services to allow them to improve the level of animal health services at field level. It can be surveillance, vaccination, it can be several things. Again, a few examples of countries I showcased here. The red ones are the ones that you can find in the OIE PPP handbook. We've done 2 pages on each of those cases. There are 12 of them, and it will give you a sense of the variety of activities that can be conducted in collaboration between public and private in the domain. I've put a little arrow so that, just to introduce Raymond, who will speak about Afghanistan, which is an excellent example of a transactional PPP, as a matter of fact. So this will be presented next. The second cluster or second type is collaborative PPP, where producer associations are working with the government. Very often it's a dual motive, or it's a dual initiative, because they have trade or export interest and they want to safeguard those interests from a business standpoint and also from an economic standpoint at the country level. And we've done that kind of thing we've seen that kind of PPP in Paraguay, in Namibia, in Australia, in Saudi Arabia. Australia has what is called Animal Health Australia, and I'm very happy that we'll have a presentation of Animal Health Ireland, because this is an excellent example also of a collaborative PPP in Ireland. So I'm very eager to hear our colleague from Ireland. And the last part is a transformative PPP. I won't go in detail into it, but it's very often initiated by private companies. I have put a few examples here. And the idea is to collaborate and improve services in the veterinary domain with the government in order to create the conditions that will be amenable to better business. Obviously, there is a business incentive, but the government and the public sector also has a lot to gain. And I've given examples with Zoetis and Sidai in Kenya and Ethio Chicken in Ethiopia, or Hester in India, where these companies, which I name, have worked with either the national government or the state governments. It's the case for Hester in India. India is a big country, so it's worked at the state level. And Hester is working with the state governments to improve the level of services at producer and smallholder farmer level in India. So with that, just to conclude that this is going on, this is not finished. As I said, PPP is really part of the DNA of OIE now, and we are committed to continue supporting it. We've just obtained a renewal of the funds from the Gates Foundation to improve the work that we can do in the domain. There are several activities which are planned. I'm just naming one because we were working this morning on it. We are going to organize 2 webinars with FAO on called Stop ASF, Public and Private Partnering for Success. This is to showcase the power of PPP for ASF. And here also I have seen there is a presenter from Denmark who is going to talk about PPP and ASF control. So that's again a super good illustration of how PPP can be super efficacious. We will do more support activity. We will do additional trainings on PPP and surveillance and trade and crisis management. There is a lot of demand. And we are also, and I wanted to conclude on that, developing a PPP interactive database with our colleagues from CIRAD, because we have been asked a lot of time to gather those success stories so that people can cross-pollinate. And so we are doing this now, and I hope it will be available later in the year. And with that being said, I hope that some of you around the table or in the audience today will be interested in collaborating with the OIE. And you know, I just finished with thank you, and don't hesitate to reach out to me or to the OIE to see how we can best you know, synergize our actions, because I think there is nothing worse than working in silos, and we all have our silos of communication, and I'm just delighted today that we are opening those silos. Merci beaucoup, and floor is yours, Koen. I hope I did not extend too much my and eat into Raymond's time. So thank you.
No, that was perfect, Isabel. Thank you very much. Thank you for setting the scene on the different the context of PPPs and how they can be successful. So we will address questions at the end. So to the audience, please, if you have any questions to Isabel directly or to the others, do not hesitate to put them in the Q&A box, for which you can find the icon at the bottom of the Zoom application. And having said, it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, which is Raymond Briscoe. Raymond is also a veterinarian. He graduated from the University College of Dublin, and he has been involved for many years in working in Canada, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, the Arabic Emirates, and now in Afghanistan on animal health management. He is now the executive director of the NGO called the Dutch Committee for Afghanistan, which is doing a lot of work and interesting work and successful work in the field of animal health production and welfare in Afghanistan. And as mentioned earlier, he is member of the expert panel of OIE on veterinary legislation, veterinary paraprofessionals, and the PPPs. So Raymond, please go ahead in showing the way that the PPP have evolved in a difficult circumstances as Afghanistan. Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, clear, loud and clear.
Great. Thank you very much, Koen. Greetings to everyone, and I hope everybody is keeping well. Firstly, I would like to thank EuFMD for organizing this important seminar and giving me the opportunity to tell you an inspiring story from Afghanistan. I'm sorry about the video of a picture of myself, but the internet is quite poor here, so I'll just leave it off for the moment. We have developed here a very innovative network, which is robust and active, of community-based veterinary paraprofessionals, which we call paravets. These are working in the private sector throughout the country, providing quality services on a fee-per-service basis to livestock owners in their own communities. These are highly trained by us. They have a training of approximately 6 months and are working also in partnership with the Animal Health Authority through a sanitary mandate contracting scheme. This is a partnership which enhances effective animal disease reporting, investigation, prevention, and control in the country. And it's obviously particularly relevant for FMD and other similar transboundary animal diseases. Just to give you some background to the context with regard to veterinary services in this country, We have the importance of livestock, the role of veterinary paraprofessionals, or VPPs, which I will call them from now on, the veterinary field unit model and network, and the PPP for the control and prevention of fast diseases and other diseases as well. The examples that I will give will be on FMD and PPR. Afghanistan has a population of around 36.6 million people, and 20 million of those are dependent on livestock. And livestock here is the engine of the rural economy. The emphasis is on livestock grazing. There are small subsistence farming, and 75% of Afghans live in rural areas. So they rely very heavily on livestock for their livelihoods and food security. So all improvements we can make in animal health, production, and welfare directly impacts the economy and the quality of life. This slide will show that the majority of livestock species are small ruminants, sheep and goats. And these are mainly owned by sedentary, but the larger majority are with the pastoralists, or what we call kuchi. These are migratory nomads in Afghanistan. But these numbers can vary considerably. I think the last census was by FAO in 2003. So when there's drought or disasters, they can decrease as well. But this is from 2014 Central Statistics Office here in Afghanistan. The VPPs in the private sector. As I said, these are community-based providers, and they provide a quality clinical veterinary service to farmers in their own communities. They work from a veterinary field unit. This is just a name given to an animal clinic, if you like, which is usually based in a location which is easy to access by farmers. They are called paraveterinarians, and these graduates and service providers, they come from their own community. And at present in Afghanistan, we have about 800 throughout the country that are active and working. And the beauty of this system is that it's very sustainable, because it's a full cost recovery, it's a fee per service basis, and farmers pay for the service. Again, it's officially recognized by government, and these VPPs are licensed to work. So they provide a valuable resource to the National Veterinary Services for, as I said, disease reporting, investigation, prevention, and control. There are three critical components that I would like to say. One is that we need an enabling environment and proper regulations in place. We need government monitoring and licensing. And three, access to quality products is very important, vaccines and medicines. Their activities, some of their activities are listed here. I won't go through them all, but they do provide a clinical service delivery. They're involved in vaccinations and sampling and surveillance. Key is as well, they do disease reporting. So they provide essential data to government and an early warning system, because they are located in very rural areas. So they are really the eyes and ears of government. As mentioned in a previous slide, it is important that there is a supply of quality vaccines and medicines. So in 2011, we set up a commercial company called VetServe, which imports and distributes quality product to the service providers. You will see the pictures, and you will notice the ones that are pre-COVID and also the ones that are post-COVID or within the COVID pandemic that we're in at the moment. So we have to observe very, very strict biosafety, biosecurity. As mentioned also, these VPPs, they work at community level, and we adopt a very holistic, integrated approach with other stakeholders, including community health workers. So they have also an important element in relation to zoonosis and One Health. We provide them with cold boxes and solar-powered refrigerators and ice packs, and also a motorbike for getting around. So the cold chain is a very important element of the keeping the vaccines at the proper temperature and bringing them out to the field. Now, the PPP, as I mentioned, is a transactional type, and as Isabel said, there are 3 types of PPPs. It is in the form of a sanitary mandate, which is really a contract issued by public sector to private sector to carry out a public sector function. And there's a gradual integration of this VFU network of VPPs into the National Veterinary Services. It was launched in 2010, and also these VPPs are licensed by government. And the curriculum that they're taught was also reviewed by OIE. It's a 6-month course, which seems short, but it is in the context of the needs of the country and the type of services that the trainees who eventually graduate will provide. And there is also continuing education involved as well after they graduate, depending on the needs. Examples of PPPs, and between 2015 2018, we had an arrangement for the progressive control pathway for PPR. And this was when the OIE FAO Global Control Eradication Program came into being. This was an ideal time to bring in the PPP between public and private sector. The targeted beneficiaries were pastoralists because they were the identified risk group because of their movement with large flocks of sheep and goats. It was a nationwide vaccination program, of which and some 358 VPPs were involved through a sanitary contract. And during that campaign, 12.5 million small ruminants were vaccinated. There was also extension and awareness given on the disease and also on other diseases as well, transboundary diseases. And samples were collected pre and post, and they were sent to the laboratory for analysis. EuFMD, we had 2 vaccination programs, 2016, 2017, through 10 provinces of the country. And this was also through a sanitary contract, and vaccination was provided to dairy cooperative members, together with extension and sample collection pre and post. In conclusion, a PPP is a win-win situation for both. And as Isabel says, 2 important elements are trust and a shared interest. It needs good governance. It needs joint monitoring and a proper review process during the PPP and following the PPP. The roles and responsibilities must be clearly defined. And it does bring more, it strengthens the National Veterinary Services and brings a more effective service. And you have disease reporting, prevention and control, as I said. It's cost efficient. There are economic benefits, and you can also do extension outreach, which we have been doing during this pandemic on COVID-19 and other zoonotic diseases in partnership with the Ministry of Public Health, and also One Health as well. So that is the conclusion of the presentation, and thank you very much for listening, and I hope it was of interest to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for a very concise and presentation of the work you've been doing with your Dutch Committee for Afghanistan in Afghanistan. Very important and very different, well, very different approach than we would take maybe in Europe, very to the point and to the field. Okay, so let's move to the next. It's my pleasure to present Piet van Temse to you. Piet van Temse is a Belgian veterinarian. He first had, after he graduated from vet school, he had his own practice for 6 years. And then later on in 1986, he joined the veterinary services of the Belgian Ministry of Agriculture, where he actually contributed to the control of several fast disease outbreaks. He later became the CEO of the Belgian Federal Food Agency and later on the Federal Medicine Agency. And then later on, he became president of Boerenbond, Belgium's largest farmers organization. So actually he made the move from public sector to private sector. Piet held other various mandates. He was the president of the State Advisory Board of Agriculture and Fisheries. He was the president of the Belgian Agri-Food Chain Platform. He was a member of the management board of the EFSA. He was vice president of the World Farmers Organization. And currently he still is the president of the Belgian Federation of the Food Banks. Piet will give us insights on the success of the Sanitary Fund, a PPP, which actually was established in Belgium in the context of animal disease management. Piet, please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Koen. Thank you for the introduction and good day to you all. I try to share my screen. Can you see? Koen, can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, fine. So as Koen explained, I have lived the animal disease management from different sides as a practitioner, as a co-worker and director of the Belgian Veterinary Services and the Food Safety Agency, and later in my career as the chairman of the biggest farmers union. So I've seen the problems from all sides. What I try to explain to you is how in Belgium we were confronted in the past with several outbreaks of fast diseases, and how we tried to make a public-private partnership for the management of these outbreaks. The private-public partnership is a budgetary fund, is a government fund, in fact, for the health and quality of animals and animal products. I should first perhaps tell you that we have in Europe a long tradition of mutual funds to manage disease outbreaks. They go back to the first half of the previous century, where we had big problems with tuberculosis in cattle in Europe, and where several groups of cattle breeders created mutual funds with the help of the authorities. In the 80s of the past century, we were confronted with several big outbreaks of African swine fever, of brucellosis in cattle, of classical swine fever in a densely populated area as Belgium. And then started the reflection on how can we create a structure in which we can manage these problems in a sustainable way. The first sanitary fund was created at the end of the 80s, in 89. Second was the law of 23rd of March of 1998. So it exists for more than 20 years. And as you see, there is a legal ground for the funding, but also how do we define programs under governance of the fund, etc. In fact, it's based on three principles. The three principles are: first, co-financing. In the 80s of the previous century, government came to the conclusion that it was impossible to really continue to fund all these disease management programs only through the government, because it was a kind of a blank check to the sector. So the first principle was that the different sectors had to co-finance disease management programs. The second was that there was a shared responsibility between stakeholders, between government, between the sectors, the sectors that were concerned, between the veterinary professions, etc. And the third principle that there was a shared governance, a co-management by the producers. The production sectors had their say in how do we define our disease management policy. And as already been said, there is a common interest, of course, and there is the economy of the sector, but there is also the One Health approach, which has a link with all the zoonoses that we are confronted with and all the diseases, also antibiotic resistant, etc. So the fund provides aids to holders of animals within a legal framework of the official disease control. The revenues of the sanitary fund are on the one side contributions by the sectors. Farmers have to pay a kind of contribution to the sanitary fund in function of the size of their farm, of their activity of the sector. And the second element is the co-financing of public authorities, mainly European Union, for approved control programs. So it's really a public-private partnership, also as far as the revenues are concerned. As I said, the contributions are paid by different sectors. Each sector has its own fund, because one of the main concerns was how do we prevent that one sector has to pay for a major problem in another sector. From the side of the farmers' organizations, this was a big issue. So it was decided that the different sectors have their own governance and their own reserves within the sanitary fund. The co-financing of the public of the public authorities, as I say, mainly European. Here you see the example for Salmonella, but there are many examples. Blue tongue disease, classical swine fever, African swine fever, etc., etc. It's for all species, for all kind of diseases. The expenditure of the fund at the other side is compensation of farmers for losses when cattle animals are culled, early slaughtered due to notifiable diseases. We did this for BSE, classical swine fever, avian influenza, Newcastle disease, Salmonella. The second thing is the funding of control programs. I give the example here of the purchase of vaccines, but there is also the financing of animal health labs. We have in each region we have an organization that is of fact managed by stakeholders, by a board of stakeholders, in which we try to organize the diagnostic tools and the different programs. And well, another important element is the fees for veterinarians. Veterinarians are key players in this whole animal disease management operations, and in order to motivate and to well organize our sanitary programs, there are programs for fees paid to veterinarians for vaccination, for sample taking, etc. So in fact, you have three main activities: compensation of farmers for economic losses. Very important. You can't ask a farmer to contribute to programs if he has not a minimum of guarantee for compensation if it goes wrong. Control programs and reporting to national and international, European and multilateral organizations, OIE, the European Commission, etc., and fees for veterinarians. What's important is the governance of the sanitary funds, as we call it. The governance is, in fact, as I say, it's a shared governance by all stakeholders. In fact, you see here in the lower side of the slide the different partners in the governance of the sanitary fund. You have the farmers' unions. The farmers are the largest contributors to the fund. You have the organizations of veterinarians, who are also concerned in different programs. You have the genetic organizations. In Belgium, it's called VRV, Association Wallonne de l'Élevage, traders, cattle traders also. You have these regional lab structures for animal health management. And then you have the representation of the government. The representation of government means veterinary services that are embedded now in the Food Safety Agency and in the Ministry for Public Health, but also scientific contributions from our reference labs and from our scientific boards. We have different working groups per species, as you see: dairy, poultry, cattle, pigs. And so the remit of this board, the competences of this board, too fast here. They give advice on they give advice to the council and in the working groups. They advise the governments on what programs should be set up, how do we finance them, how do we organize them, etc. These programs are the contributions, the financial contributions are fixed by a royal decree. You have the law on the creation of the foods of the sanitary fund. By royal decree, there is a regulation that every farmer has a compulsory contribution to these funds, and in ministerial decrees, the programs that are run within the funds are determined. But as I say, this is all on the advice of the board of the sanitary fund, with all stakeholders included. Now, when you look at strengths and weaknesses, and this is my last slide, I think the strength is obviously through pushing the sector to contribute to the financing. You also reflect on why do we use this money. The second strength is the co-financing of public authorities, clearly. The third is a Belgian thing. It's a federal organization. Belgium is a complicated country, but I will not go into detail. One of the advantages that you can make through these contributions, we have created reserves. Reserves that are the piggy bank, as it's called at the other side of the slide. So you can build financial reserves during years to use them when you have outbreaks of fast diseases. This is an important item. It's also a difficult item for government funds. We have a clear strategy for legal diseases, and all stakeholders are represented in the governance. I think these are the strengths, weaknesses. It's sometimes limited in action because not all diseases are covered. We cannot compensate purely economical loss. For example, if you have an outbreak of avian influenza and your export of African swine fever and your export position is at stake, you cannot compensate sectors for those indirect economic losses. Sometimes there is a lack of vision and strategy, and then you have reserves, but this is also an attractive piggy bank, and you always have to take care of not to use it for the short term. You have to have a long-term vision. You have to limit the application of your programs so that you don't create a draining of money to programs that do not contribute to the finality of the sanitary fund. I leave it to this. I hope this helped you to understand what our experience was in Belgium. And I thank you. I thank Koen for the invitation, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Piet. Thank you for introducing us to the Belgian Sanitary Fund, which is actually a backbone for the public-private partnership in Belgium. We'll have a debate later on. The next speaker is from Denmark. It is my pleasure to introduce Jens Munk Ebbesen. Jens is employed by the Danish Agriculture and Food Council since 2010. He is now the Director of Food and Veterinary Issues, and he is also a Chief Veterinary Member of the Advisory Board for the Danish Technical University, the National Veterinary Institute, since 2016. So he has his fields of responsibility are zoonosis, including the surveillance plans, risk assessment and evaluations, and also national and international animal health policies. And Jens will explain how in Denmark the raising of a fence was a potential to set up a public-private partnership. So Jens, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Koen, and I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes.
In a short while, it should come. Here it is. It should be. Okay, Koen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, thank you very much. And good afternoon from Copenhagen, everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to have this opportunity to give a short speech here in this very important area here. I think it's a very, very important subject about the public-private partnerships. And I can say that it's good to see all of you here and listen to these good colleagues throughout Europe here and the world. And I'm missing to meet you all, some of you at least, at the OIE General Assembly. It was cancelled last year and virtual this year, but I hope in 2022 to be back physically in Paris to this OIE General Assembly. Well, as Koen said, I'm employed at the Danish Agriculture and Food Council. That's a member-owned council. We are owned and financed by the Danish farmers and by the Danish industry connected to the agriculture, meaning dairies, feed mills, slaughterhouses, rendering plants, and so on. All these kind of industry is a part of our members. So I'm representing all of them. I'll try to give you a short overview on how we the setup of the cooperation between different stakeholders in Denmark, and then I'll tell you something about this, at least in the beginning, quite controversial fence we put up between Denmark and Germany in 2019. Well, first of all, I'll say that we have through decades, almost centuries, have this kind of cooperation in Denmark between the officials, the government, the Danish Veterinary and Food Administration as one part. We have the universities. Here it's the Danish Veterinary Consortium as one part. We have the Danish veterinarians, and we have my council representing the farmers and the industry. As Pete just mentioned before, when we go back in history, one of the first things that I remember that we did here in Denmark was the eradication of bovine tuberculosis, like Pete talked about. And that was one of the first times where we put together this cooperation here and all these different stakeholders in order to try to eradicate that disease. So that could be other stakeholders involved in the different issues we're dealing with, but that's just to illustrate that this trustful, open, transparent cooperation between these different stakeholders is the platform and the key to have a successful cooperation. Also, when we're talking about private and public-private partnerships. In the Danish pig industry, now I'm talking about the pig industry, but it could also be, of course, in both in poultry or in the dairy or cattle sector. We have a focus on every single step on the value chain from the plow to the plate, you can say. Every single step is important, also when we're dealing with a different kind of exotic diseases or contagious diseases. So that every single part of this chain, every single individual here has a responsibility and has to be able to handle this responsibility in a proper way. To be able to do that, you need to have the trust in each other, to know each other, to have relations to each other, and to be able and willing to share experiences and knowledges. That could be in between farmers, in between industries, but also between farmers, industry, and the public side. That's very important that we all of us share all the experiences and the knowledge we have, because we have the same goal. That is, meaning that we want to have healthy animals and low use of antibiotics and safe food at the end of the day. As a result of all the efforts we have put together in the PPP in Denmark, you can say, and we have, just to show you here, and I have emphasized the diseases which is concerning the pig diseases, but you can see that it's a long time ago since we had foot and mouth disease last time. It was back in 1983. SVD, we never had that. African swine fever, we have never had that. And classical swine fever, we have to go back to before Second World War since we had that last time. That's some of just a picture of the success that we have achieved through this cooperation between the different stakeholders in Denmark through a lot of years. When we're going to then start looking on the African swine fever and our efforts to try to avoid to get the African swine fever to Denmark. The key word here is the public-private partnership, no doubt about that. We have been discussing this since 2014 and also before that, but when the ASF hit the European Union back in 2014, we've speeded up and intensified the cooperation between the authorities on the one side, veterinarians on the other side, universities on the third side, and then us as organization on the fourth side. A lot of activities has taken place over the years. In 2019, we had an exercise on the contingency plans, an exercise running on African swine fever. It was a full-scale exercise. The only thing that we didn't do was culling some herds, but everything else was involved, including the emergency agency, the Danish Veterinary Food Administration, the police, us as organization, farmers, rendering plants, and so on. Everybody was involved in 1 week full-scale exercise, and you can see some of the pictures here from that exercise. That was again a picture of the partnership between the different stakeholders here. We have also targeted exercises either on the private side or on the public side, and sometimes also together. We have some dilemma exercises where we work together with both the public and the private side. The meetings on regular basis, expert groups dealing with different things, and task force if needed. We set down that with all the different stakeholders. Then we also have some common courses, you can say, that is arranged by the Danish Veterinary and Food Administration, but the participants is coming from the industry side and from my organization as well, and from farmers side, veterinarians and so on. So we try to do this courses in how to deal with different exotic diseases in a good and proper and scientific way, you can say. Of course, we have some precautions, you can call it, over many years in order to avoid the diseases in the pig production. The ban of swill feeding for many years. All herds are registered in a central husbandry register. All movements are registered. Luckily we just have very few, and it's only hobby backyard farms compared to some of our European colleagues more down south and to the east. There's a lot of backyard farms which cause them a lot of challenges in the battle of African swine fever. We have very few of those. We don't have any import of live pigs for production, and since for more than 40 years we have now had this so-called specific pathogen-free system, which gives us a high biosecurity in the pig production. And that has taught the farmers how to behave and how to do it in a good way when we're talking biosecurity. That also helps when we're dealing with diseases like African swine fever and trying to avoid that getting into our farms. Then we come to the very famous wild boar fence along the Danish-German border. We have quite a narrow border to Germany. Most of Denmark is surrounded by water, but we have about 70 kilometers of border to Germany. And you can see here on the map the fence, which is the red and black spotted line, and some part of it is black. This is when the fence is north of the Danish-German border, but most of the way it's running just along the Danish-German border. When you look on the timeline for this fence, there was a lot of discussions after, as I said, 2014, where we intensified the cooperation between the different stakeholders, and we have discussions of many things. And one of the things were actually that we were in a situation in Denmark that we had very few wild boars in Denmark. There's quite a lot of wild boars just south of the Danish-German border. When we look on the threat right now, or the disease situation in Germany right now, we are not afraid of wild boars migrating from Germany to Denmark and bringing in the African swine fever. What we have seen in Czech Republic and in Belgium and Poland and other places is that the human factor is quite a risk when you have wild boars in the nature. So at that time, we realized that we have an opportunity in Denmark due to this very low number of wild boars that we could possibly eradicate the wild boars from the wildlife. So there was discussions, dialogue between the government, authorities, and us as industry throughout 2017 and 2018. And then there was an idea created about maybe it was possible to build a fence between along the border between Germany and Denmark to keep out new wild boars coming down south from Germany, from Schleswig-Holstein. And then try to shoot away all those wild boars we had in Denmark. And in March 2018, there was a political agreement between the government and some part of the opposition in the Danish parliament. And a large majority in June 2018 voted for the relevant law. So there was the possibility, a legal base to create this fence along the border. And actually in January 19, the construction of this fence along the border was started. And it was a private company who won the competition to build this fence, and they started in 2019. And in December 19, it was finished, and it was complete all the way along the Danish-German border. This fence has had a lot of different attention from the public, from other authorities throughout the world, and so on. And on the picture down to the left, I think it was in May 2019, in connection with the OIE in Paris, the US CVO, Dr. Scherer, was in Denmark with a delegation and was visiting the construction of this fence. After that, in January 2020, the CVO from Canada, Dr. Komal, was in Denmark with a delegation as well, both with industry and authorities, looking on the fence and what we're doing in Denmark concerning the possibility to try to eradicate the wild boars in Denmark as one of the precautions against introduction of African swine fever to Denmark. To the right, you see the former Danish CVO, Dr. Henriksen, and he was actually one of the people behind the idea of creating this fence, and he is standing there on the day when it was officially opened or was finished, you can say. in December 2019. When we're just looking on the eradication of wild boars, there was also political discussions in Denmark about that. A lot of different stakeholders had some interest in that. That could be wildlife organizations, natural nature organizations, and so on. They have a lot of opinion on if there should be wild boars in Denmark or not. Hunters organization, a lot of hunters wanted there to be wild boars in the Danish nature. But there was a political decision in 2017-18 about eradication of wild boars when, if it was possible to set up this fence, which it was done, and then there was made a decision to shoot away all the wild boars in Denmark. I say all the wild boars. We have a very low number, and we had that before we started this campaign as well. It was about 150, maybe a little more wild boars in Denmark. That's not very many compared to other countries throughout Europe. And that was a very special situation we had in Denmark. So according to the latest news I've got from the Danish Nature Agency, who are responsible of shooting away these wild boars together with hunters and landowners, there's maximum 2 wild boars left now in the area down south of Denmark. So that's very, very good. We're very, very close to have 0 wild boars in the wild nature now. To be able to do that, there's been put up over 100 feeding spots around the area north of the Danish-German border, and a lot of cameras along the fence and so on. And also there's some openings in the fence, of course, due to the Schengen rules in Europe. And those openings, they are closed by using some smell fence, we can call it, which is some kind of the same stuff as used in the Czech Republic when they had the outbreaks there. The shooting of wild boars is 24/7 all year round now. It's allowed to use feed and light for hunting, and you can use traps as well. And as I said, it's a nature agency which is responsible, but also private hunters are doing quite a good job there. When we're looking on the fence along the border, it was, as I said, 70 kilometers long. It's 1.5 meter high, and it's digged 0.5 meter down in the soil in order to avoid wild boars to go under it. And it costs in total about 10 million euros to construct. And as part of this PPP, you can say that we were very interested in having this fence to protect the the Denmark against African swine fever by eradicating wild boars from Danish nature. We were co-financing this project, and we paid 3 million euros as part of the construction of the fence. There's been a lot of attention on this fence. There's been a lot of different stakeholders that had some ideas and some meanings about it. Of course, it was controversial to raise a fence along the Danish-German border, which has been open for many years without any restrictions, you can say. And then suddenly to put up a fence like that was quite controversial. And there was quite a lot of resistance on the German side. There was a lot of demonstrations. There's been some, we can call it vandalism to the fence. It has been cut down some places, but it's raised again. And then there's been some more funny demonstrations like this with this pink pig put on the fence. It's for the German side who set that up to the fence and saying that no pigs are illegal. The hunters in Denmark, we have had a very close cooperation with the hunters and the hunters organization. And in the beginning, they were against this fence, against shooting down the wild boars in Denmark. But the fence is considered as being temporary, meaning that when we come in a situation, if we come in a situation where ASF is no longer a threat, and the only way to achieve that is to have a vaccine, I think. If that should happen, we are able to remove the fence again, and actually the value of the material of the fence is so high that it should be able to pay for all the cost to take it down again. So that's part of the construction plan, so to speak. Yes, and when we're talking about hunters, to the right, you can see a magazine which we have made in my organization, but there's a lot of contributors to that from the public side, from the universities, from the authorities, but also from the hunters, describing why do we want to have the wild boars removed from the Danish nature for a temporary period of time. And this magazine is about 20 pages or something like that. It's quite good, and it is sent out to all the hunters in Denmark through their hunters organization, and to all the farmers in Denmark, and all others who want to have it can have this magazine telling about the consequences of African swine fever, both due to the what is the consequences for pigs getting sick, what is the consequences for the export from Denmark, what is the possibility to eradicate, and so on, and what have we seen throughout Europe. So that's a lot of information which has helped us to get through with this finch and this eradication of wild boars. A lot of other activities has taken place in these partnerships. It's the creation of signs along the highways in Denmark and all the parking lots. And you can see on this side, on the picture here, there's a logo of Danish Veterinary Food Administration and a logo of my organization there, because we were paying for this sign, and the Danish authorities had set them up all along these highways. We have made contracts with the farmers' contracts with foreign employees has been changed during time, because nowadays we see a lot of foreign employees on Danish farms coming in, bringing the food from their hometowns, and now the contracts are saying that they are not allowed to do that. And we made these contracts as well after consulting the Danish authorities how to do it, and how to make this information to these employees about the importance not to bring foodstuffs from areas which could be which could have African swine fever in the wildlife or in domestic pigs. Landowners have contracts with hunters, meaning that now the hunters are obliged to shoot when they shoot down the wild boars if they see some on the land they have rented for hunting, or they have to report to the landowner or to the Danish Natural Agency about these wild boars. And these contracts is also a part of the public-private partnership, which has helped us to eradicate the numbers of wild boars in Denmark. A lot of other things are mentioned here, but I won't go more into details on that. We have made some different kind of information leaflets in different languages telling about what not to do and what to do. And here you can see also again with the logos of the Danish Veterinary Food Administration and my organization. So it's brought to truck drivers, to employees, to people working in the forest, to people coming to pick berries in the summertime, seasonal workers, and so on, to tourists as well. All of them. All of this is just a matter of trying to get as much information as possible to anybody who could do a risk. Yes, I think that was that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jens. Very clear presentation on the wild boar friends of Denmark. I'll just move on to the last presenter today, which is David Graham. And David Graham, he is also a veterinarian. He graduated from University College of Dublin. And he obtained, as a veterinarian, he obtained a PhD from the Queen's University of Belfast. So before joining Animal Health Ireland, he spent a lot of time, an extended period at the Agri-Food and Bioscience Institute, where he was responsible for laboratory-based research on a range of viruses and bacteria in mammals, birds, and fish. So, and he joined the Animal Health Ireland in 2010 as a program manager for biosecure diseases, and then was appointed CEO in 2017. So, David will explain his experiences with a public-private partnership in the context of Animal Health Ireland. David, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Koen, and good afternoon to everyone. Certainly to thank the organisers of the webinar for the opportunity to present to you today and to tell you a little bit about Animal Health Ireland and how we function in the Irish context as a public-private partnership. And a particular pleasure then, I have to say as well, to be sharing the platform with a fellow UCD graduate in Raymond, albeit working in a very different context. And as an aside, only interesting to note that the cattle population of Afghanistan and Ireland aren't very far apart. Raymond mentioned 5.8 million cattle, and we would have, depending on the time of year, around 6.5 million.
Dr. Graham, sorry, it's Filippo here. We are seeing the backup of your presentation. Could you please click on the really top, the second button, display setting, or the opposite side, on the left side? The second one, display setting, please. Yes, duplicate. Yeah, okay, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
That's better. Okay. So in terms of the organisation itself, Animal Health Ireland, we were established just over 12 years ago, and the rationale for the creation of the organisation was to address the need to provide a vehicle through which industry could coordinate efforts to address those economically important diseases for which government was not primarily responsible. And even at that time, it was recognised that this industry-led approach represented a substantial departure from the typical government-led model of addressing animal health that had prevailed up to that point, and indeed that its success would require constructive engagement from a diverse range of stakeholders. The mission of the organisation, you can see in growing out of that, is to contribute to a profitable and sustainable farming and wider agri-food sector through improved animal health. And again, reflecting the rationale for its establishment, our remit is those economically important diseases of livestock which are not subject to international regulation. We operate obviously as a private public partnership, and at the time of our establishment we had 14 stakeholders from across industry. That has grown subsequently to the point now where we have almost 40 stakeholders within the organisation, and those can be grouped essentially under these 5 different headings, 4 of those in the private sector and then 1 in government. But farmer and related organisations, dairy and beef processors, AI or breeding companies, professional advisory and support services, and then also government and state agencies, and in particular the Department of Agriculture. Obviously, the remit of the organisation itself is wide in terms of both the production sectors and the diseases which we could be dealing with. So one of the immediate tasks following the establishment of the organisation was to develop a work programme. And this was done in a twin track approach, so through an expert policy Delphi study and also a farmer priority identification survey. And the details of those are published in the paper you can see on screen. But really what emerged from that were broadly overlapping or common priorities from those 2 sources. And that formed the basis of our initial work programme, which was in the cattle sector, and that in turn reflecting our funding sources. And this has expanded subsequently then to cover these various areas that you can see. Those in light green representing, so from BVD down to pig health check, representing formal programs with specific targets. So for example, for BVD, the eradication of that particular virus, whilst those in green are in dark green at the bottom, so calf health, parasite control, biosecurity are additional areas of activity for which we develop resources and promote best practice. And each of these programs and activities then is supported by a specific technical working group, and each of these has an independent chair and is made up then of experts and experienced veterinary practitioners who develop resources and provide ongoing objective scientific support to the programs. And in addition then, each program has a dedicated implementation group, and the members of the implementation groups are drawn from our stakeholders, and they are key, are being part of the implementation groups, are a key way in which the stakeholders contribute to our activity within each program. So for example, it was the BVD implementation group that took the decision to firstly to initiate a voluntary program for eradication in 2012, and then subsequently to progress this to a compulsory nationwide program in 2013 onwards. And this particular group then meets and continues to meet regularly, perhaps 4 to 6 weekly, to continue to review, to oversee, to modify the program. And the other key way, of course, that our stakeholders can contribute and do contribute to the organisation is financially. So for 2021, we have a budgeted subscription income from stakeholders of approximately €1.7 million. And our funding model is such then that government, through the Department of Agriculture, commits to match our private sector income on a like-for-like basis, so 50% private sector, 50% government. But you can see then that the ongoing commitment to AHI of our private sector stakeholders is critical to our continued government financial support. So in the next few slides, I will just say a little bit about 3 of our programs to give you a flavour of the breadth of our activities. So we have mentioned BVD already. This program becoming compulsory back in 2013 and is based on annual tissue tag testing of the national calf crop. So some 2.3 million calves per year currently. And as you can see, in 2013, the prevalence of persistently infected or PI calves was 0.66%. And as the map illustrates, these essentially were nationally distributed, essentially being detected in all areas where cattle were present. And since then, significant progress has been made in reduction. So for 2020, only 0.03% of calves had a positive result to that ear notch test. And accordingly then, a significant change in geographical distribution and in density associated with that. And in parallel, a reduction in herd level prevalence also. So from somewhere just over 11% of herds with positive results in 2013 to just over 0.5% with positive results in 2020. And we're forecasting for the current year, for 2021, perhaps positive results in maybe 250 out of some 83,000 breeding herds. And the decision to progress with the national programme was underpinned by this economic assessment, which indicated that in the absence of control and in the prevailing endemic situation at that point, that the annual losses to farmers due to BVD were in the region of €100 million per year. So based on the reduction in prevalence that we have seen in the interim and even taking account of programme costs, we would estimate then that the benefit to farmers, the net benefit in 2020 in excess of €85 million. Beef Health Check is another programme, a more recent one introduced in 2015, and this was developed or introduced to develop tools, firstly to assist farmers and their veterinary practitioners to control losses due to liver fluke, liver abscessation, pneumonia, through capture, analysis and reporting of abattoir data from post-mortem meat inspection. And that is the second aim, to contribute to the development of economic breeding indices that can be incorporated or that do incorporate health and disease data. So the programme, as you can see here, uses touchscreen technology to allow veterinary inspectors in the factories to capture their findings according to a standardised scoring system. And the reports for farmers are then issued directly from the meat factories for each batch of animals that have been submitted. And in addition, the results are transferred to a programme database, which is provided by the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation. And they're available for review and analysis to the farmer on a herd level and to veterinary practitioners on practice level dashboards. Again, the data have been used to examine the economic impact of liver fluke. In this initial study of 32,000 steers, the estimated difference in mean weight at slaughter, assuming a fixed slaughter age in the study of 819 days, was 36 kilos, and that being worth €74 at current prices. In addition, and in support of the second programme objective, the information has also been used by ICBF to demonstrate the heritability of resistance to liver fluke, and this has formed the basis of breeding values for dairy and beef sires. These are now updated quarterly on the database, and this allows farmers to select bulls for breeding in order to reduce the likelihood that their progeny in turn will be found at slaughter to have undergone infection with liver fluke. And the benefit in particular of this approach to addressing liver fluke and of genetic gain is that, unlike management changes, the gains made each year are permanent, and those gains then made over successive years are cumulative. And then to change species, pig health check. This is our most recent programme, which began in 2019. And this takes a holistic approach to improving health and welfare in the pig sector through a range of activities which encompass biosecurity, animal welfare, the capture again of ante-mortem and post-mortem meat inspection, analysis of antimicrobial usage, and also contributing to development and refinement of a national salmonella control plan. And all of these are being integrated into a central pig health check database, to which again farmers and vets will have access. So that's a very quick flavour of some of our activities. Looking ahead, there are a range of established and emerging national priorities that have significant animal health and welfare components, and that align in turn with current and developing Animal Health Ireland activities. The first of these on the left, the challenge of addressing AMR, antimicrobial resistance. These challenges are well recognised, and the Irish National Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance, the first plan under that has just completed, as you can see, in 2020, and a new plan which integrates again animal, human and environmental measures under a One Health approach is due to be published shortly. And a further series of national strategies, as you can see here, have been published in recent months, and these include a farmed animal biosecurity strategy, an animal welfare strategy, a TB strategy, TB eradication strategy, and also on the right-hand side, a roadmap towards climate neutrality. And again, a recent study that underpins this particular roadmap projects that animal health measures will contribute some 7 or 8% of all greenhouse gas mitigation from Ireland, from the agriculture sector at least, in Ireland over the next decade. And again, interesting just that these particular measures are indicated to be cost beneficial relative to the value of carbon. And again, the majority of the animal health measures that are identified in the roadmap overlap with existing Animal Health Ireland programmes, so it leaves us well placed to contribute further to delivery against these particular targets. So just to conclude, I think at this point in Ireland, the AHI model is now well established and has a demonstrated ability and track record of delivery as a public-private partnership. Over that period, we have delivered significant economic and societal benefits to a range of stakeholders, and looking ahead, both significant opportunities and challenges in the next decade to which we look forward to making our contribution. And finally, I think reflecting on the previous decade, working in partnership has been key to the progress that has been made, and looking forward over the next decade again will certainly be equally important in that time. So thank you again for the opportunity, and with that I'll hand back to Koen.
Thank you, David. Very concise and interesting, very clear presentation. So we've listened to different examples of the way that public-private partnerships have been approached in Europe and outside Europe. So to close this webinar, I invite all the presenters to a short debate to address a few issues we want to take further. So if you would all be so kind to switch on your camera. If the audience want to raise questions, please feel free and put them in the, place them in the Q&A box. But maybe before we go ahead, there's still one question to Pete directly, which was more detail. So there was a question from Michael Horn on, first of all, which diseases are covered by the sanitary fund in Belgium, which animal diseases? And secondly, how, if you talk about compensations, how are these covered distributed in cost, shared between public authorities and the farmers?
Yeah, I was just answering in the chat in the Q&A. All kinds of diseases can be covered, but they must be part of an approved official program. If they are not part of an approved official program, they are not covered by the sanitary fund. And as I said, you need some kind of a gatekeeper, you know, because you build financial reserves, and the temptation of using them for anything is always there on the side of the farmers community. But I can give examples. We have programs for BVD, we had programs for Ojeski disease in pigs. There were different kind of programs. So it's not only list, what's the OIE? I lost OIE classification, but in the past we spoke about list A diseases.
I do believe the animal health law goes back to list A diseases now, so
yeah.
you can name it like that again.
But we can do more within the sanitary fund, and as the expenditures are, as far as the expenditures are concerned, the principle in Belgium was the same initially as in Ireland. €1 for €1, split, an equal split in costs for the sector and for the government. It had always been a concern that governments might not be really trustful partners in such a partnership. And then I speak as a former chairman of the Farmers Union, but I also was active in the veterinary services, so I defended this principle with a lot of vigor. But it's hard to have a sustainable commitment of public authorities on that side. Because the expenses of the sanitary fund have an impact on les dépenses primaires, the primary expenses of the federal government. And that's there was a question on that. That's one of the things we should try to solve in the future.
Okay. Let's take that on later on in the debate. But let me first be asking you all, because you all mentioned different key components in the context of which are needed to lead to successful public-private partnerships. There's things said about trust, shared interest, funding, legal framework. All these are there. So, but I mean, what's the priority you want to build on? Because I have also the impression when the public-private partnership has been established, it becomes a bit easier to work with, to work in between the partners. But how is there, what's the first component to work on, which I just mentioned, to establish such a partnership? So, and I'll start with you, Isabel, because you have the different success stories in your repository. So is there a line, is there a common component which is important?
Well, Koen,
yes,
I think firstly, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Raymond, go.
Okay, Raymond, go ahead.
Sorry, Isabel. No, ladies
no problem.
first. No, firstly, I think there should be a national policy to enable PPPs through the appropriate legal framework to be established first. I mean, that is the first essential thing, you know. that there has to be an enabling environment and a legal framework there first before you go to the PPP.
Okay. Isabel?
Yeah, and I fully agree with you, Raymond. One thing, though, which I have seen often is that the enabling environment or the legal environment can be sometimes taken as an excuse for not proceeding with PPPs. And as in your case, I think even in some difficult situation where there is not necessarily all the text around, it should not prevent the start of a PPP. And it starts very simply in my mind by having people sitting at the same table and discussing needs. Because if there is no needs, there is no PPP, because it's always difficult to partner with people from a different culture and a different you know, set of objectives. So people should start with needs, gather around the table. I know gathering around the table nowadays is a little difficult, but and I think it's a problem, to be honest, because I personally have difficulties trusting people that I don't meet first. But in all cases, I think trust is important. And I would just throw something in the table, which I really believe in, is that I think trust should be built when people are babies. And which means, and it's a little bit blunt, but I think that a lot of it has to do with education also. If I take the example that I know well of veterinary education, I think we are all trained and educated to be either private or public, and we have, when we go out of the school, a very specific eye on the other side. And it starts there. It starts when people should be exposed to the benefits of working together when they're young, because it's more difficult to do it when they are older. So I just throw this idea, but I am a firm believer that schools, VPP, vet paraprofessional schools, and so on and so forth, farming schools, have a lot to do in understanding the benefits of collaboration. And I'll stop there. There would be much more to say, but trust to me is an essential element. Legal environment, yes, but should not be the excuse for not moving forward. Merci.
Thanks, Isabel. Let's move on. Pete.
Well, I think I had some activities in Agricort, which is a developing organization from pharma organizations. I was chairman of Agricort during several years. The existence of representative farmer unions is very important, because they are the counterpart of the governments in these discussions. And I think in many countries, there is a lot of work to do on that side, to try to have representative organizations that do their work in knowledge transfer, in motivating farmers to contribute, to participate in the system, to defend the system, in fact, and then to negotiate with governments on how these legal frameworks becomes reality. In Western Europe, in our environment, it's obvious, but in large parts of the world, it is not.
Yes, I agree. It's often seen that farmers are omitted in this partnership because they don't really have a voice. They're not really structured. Yes, you're absolutely right. Jens, what's your opinion?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I fully agree with what Pete just said, and fully. And I myself has been. Let me start another place. In Denmark, we just have one veterinary school, meaning that all the veterinarians, they know almost each other because all of us have been there to a certain time. But that's one part of it. The other part is my own career has been starting in the public service, going to the industry, back to the public service, and now back to the industry. So I've been on both parts during several times. So I have the experience from both sides and can see it from both sides. And one of the key words I think is actually trust. We've been talking so much about trust. That's right. But also the respect of each other's role when you're sitting around the table. You maybe know each other, but you have to, and you disagree, but you have also to realize that you maybe disagree because you have different roles to play when you're around the table. And that's one of the key words when you were trying to make a public partnership. And then, of course, the willingness to share experiences and knowledges, both inside between farmers, between competitors, but also between industry, farmers, and the public side. So that's all this brought together. then you can achieve something. But you have to have this trust in each other, and the transparency and the respect for each other's role, because that's I think that's a key point. If you don't have that, well, you cannot do it. Yeah.
Thanks. So David, I mean, bringing people around the table, that's crucial. But so is this a role for someone? Is this for the public sector to start that, bringing people around the table, or is that equal? How did it work in Ireland?
Yeah, it's a good question, Koen, and I think I wasn't in Animal Health Ireland at the time that the organisation was actually established, but it probably, in a sense, represented perhaps the third attempt to bring together a cross-industry government type of initiative. So it isn't straightforward. And I think, I forget which of the earlier speakers said, it is much easier. The biggest hurdle is actually getting started. It is much easier once the partnership actually starts to move, for people to start to see how it's going to work, what the outcomes are going to be, what their role may be, and so on. So after the event, obviously AHI in Ireland very much fulfills that role of bringing everyone around the table. And I think of building trust and collaboration, but that's after the event. And I would pick up on a couple of, and just support a couple of Isabel's comments. There has to be, obviously, for there to be a rationale for the organisation or a partnership, there must be unmet needs, first of all, and some means of articulating those. But then after that, there has to be a win-win. So there has to be, for all of the parties around the table, they must be able to see, be it immediate, medium term, or even longer term, that there are advantages and benefits to them. They may well have to give up something in the short term or change something in the short term, but that there is a gain to be had, and that can be worth some of the challenges, let's say, that come with working within a partnership, because certainly it's not always easy. Partners don't necessarily agree, and in some ways, actually, that robustness, providing a forum for those exchanges, is really beneficial. It can sometimes mean that the rate of progress or decision making is a little bit slower than you would wish, but no decision gets made that hasn't been thoroughly tested and challenged and pushed and explored. And then once the decision is made, it is made, and you can go on. So those would be my initial reflections on that, Koen.
Thanks. Pete, you want to add on?
Yeah, I have two elements. The first one is that there is also a movements of solidarity between farmers. The government cannot do everything. And when I mentioned the history of our animal health management in the previous century, in the beginning of the previous century, in fact, it were farmers groups that created mutual insurance systems, not the government. So there can be a movement of solidarity on the farmers level, which is important. The second element is public authorities have within their core business some obligations as far as zoonoses are concerned, as far as list A diseases are concerned, etc. So who takes the initiative? I think you are driven naturally towards a kind of a partnership. And it evolves through time. And I agree with David, once you start it, there are tensions between farmers and authorities. Farmers do not like to pay, the tensions between farmers and cattle traders, farmers and slaughterhouses. But when you have a legal framework in which you can canalize the discussion, then you can go forward. And it will be, with ups and downs, that's how it is. We all live the history of our organizations and our partnerships. But my experience is it exists in Belgium for more than 20 years. It is sustainable.
Jens, have a last word?
Yeah, well, I think both sides of a public-private partnership can initiate this kind of jobs or project or whatever you will call it. But I think that we have had some experiences in Denmark that when we, as an industry, wanted to eradicate a disease, the industry as such went together, the farmers, veterinarians, and so on, and tried to eradicate a disease. But to a certain point, you need the cooperation with the authorities, because there's always some farmers that don't want to participate in that kind of eradication program, meaning that you need some legal basis to force the last 5% or 1% into this. And that's one of the ways that you can have the private side to start up a project or a project, let's call it that. On the other hand, you can also have the other way around, where you see that the government, due to political agreements, have some goal they have to achieve on different zoonoses, and then they involve the industry, because the industry is those who knows in practice how to do and how to deal with things. They can decide a lot of things in the parliament, but if it doesn't work in real life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help anything. So that can put the people together, and we see that quite often. Last time we saw it here was actually when we had the first case of avian influenza last year in December, where the Danish Veterinary Food Administration, they gathered all the stakeholders and said, now we have the situation, how shall we deal with this and how shall we go forward? And so we meet very, very often and discuss the progress and the development of that kind of disease. So that's just an example. Thank you.
Thanks, Jens. So to conclude, so bringing it around the table is the key, and then things will go much easier afterwards. Let's think about that for the future. My next question I want to bring into the group is, so for developing these public-private partnerships, do the public and the private sector partners have sufficient freedom to operate and support? Raymond, first to you. Raymond, in Afghanistan, you established this public-private partnership. Was the government able to provide support on that?
Yeah, in Afghanistan, it's a kind of a challenge, because the government were able to support, but they lack capacity, they lack resources, and of course, for them to engage with the private sector, to engage with veterinary paraprofessionals who do the work in the rural areas, was a great way of getting the benefits for government with regard to the reach and to the reach to farmers in the rural areas and the more remote areas, and also to reach the pastoralists, if you like, as well, who are very hard to reach. And this was a benefit for the government. The other benefit for the government was the collection of very good data from the field, which was generated and which enabled them to analyze the methodology that was being used, and also the quality of the vaccine, etc. But the resources were mainly coming from the private sector. The government were doing the monitoring, joint monitoring it was. But the challenge also, the other element, would be the finances, because here in this country, livestock are not considered that important. They're way down the list with regard to priorities for funding, and unfortunately so. But yet they are key to livelihoods and key to food security and everything like that. So that's a challenge, and sometimes you really have to advocate for budget.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Pete, you mentioned it before. The co-financing of the sanitary fund in Belgium is 50-50. It's not always 50-50. We are bound by the EU in this context. is that a way to operate, or in the context of the European market, or should?
Well, of course, we are working within the framework of the European competition rules. We had a lot of problems because the Commission at one time considered the expenses come ad data state aid, in which you have a de minimis rule. So we have to look for solutions in which you can use the money without it affecting the result of the government budget, and without it being considered by the Commission as state aid, because the farmers pay for having large financial reserves at the moment that they have to be mobilized. You have to be able to do it swiftly, and that is still a problem. We are still looking for solutions on that side, but I think we can find them. Your question is in fact such a sanitary fund. If you want to motivate farmers, it must have a minimal amount of flexibility to be able to react very quickly in situations in which you have outbreaks of fast diseases.
Thank you. So, but Jens, you mentioned that the financing of the fence was a 70-30 split between government. So how is that possible?
Well, that was due to negotiations between the government and the industry, and we thought that as a responsible industry, we had to co-finance this fence. In the beginning, it was planned actually that we should be paid 100% through taxpayer money, but we decided, because we also had an interest in this, and also in order to try to get, you can call it sympathy or whatever you want to call it, but from the public, that we also were willing to put money into this project. That was one of the reasons why we did it. But I think that we sometimes experience that the possibility or the freedom to operate in this partnership can be a little bit put under pressure due to public opinions, or due to media that want the government or the official authorities to have a certain distance to the industry, and the government and the authorities want to have, you can call it an arm length principle to us, but most of the time we work close together. Again, for the respect of our roles, we have to have this all the time, to this respect. Thank you.
Okay, we're coming close to the end of this session, but I still have one question, and that is, so, well, the initiative, the PPP initiative on anticipating fast disease outbreaks, works in a multi-country context, which has different countries have different interests. So, so what would be the first step there? So, and who should take it? So, I mean, should it be the work of the initiative to move on, or can we?
It's a chicken and the egg, you know. It's a question of the chicken and the egg. It has to come from both sides. It takes two to tango. And as I say, the existence of organized farmers organizations is an important one. If you don't have that, it is very, very difficult for governments to go to negotiate with the sector. And vice versa, you need strong, as Raymond said, you need sufficient government's capacity in the public authorities to manage such systems. So in my view, it must come from both sides. It's not a question of this one has to start or that one has to start. It doesn't work like that.
Okay. Graham? Do you have a different opinion here? David, sorry. David, sorry. Yes.
Again, it takes both sides, but again, I think it's going back to identifying the need and seeking to progress that. I guess in a working in a transboundary situation is more challenging, because actually the identifying, obviously we're at a national level, but you know, who actually is the public component of that? Is it the Commission? Is it competent authorities in each member state? Do you have multiple actors on both sides of the private and public divide? So I'm afraid I don't necessarily have solutions, but I can certainly recognize the depth of the problem in terms of actually taking it forward. But again, I think it is, and as I understand, there are plans at least for simulation exercises and so on. And I think as some of that starts to gain momentum, that the initiative will find its feet and will move forward.
Thank you. With those words, I think we can close here, but these are very supporting to the initiative. Like, we should, I mean, keep up the good work and create a dialogue with the different European level, start first there, the European level, public stakeholders, the Commission, the academia, the scientific institutes. So Fabrizio was not able to be with us here to close the meeting, so I'll do that for him. So I think this was very interesting. Thank you all presenters for your contribution. Very clear examples, very interesting. I enjoyed it, and I hope and I believe the audience did as well. I want to thank also the backup, the EuFMD ops team who backed this up, who organized this, is Tiziano, Elena, and Filippo. The next event of this PPP initiative is for 6 May, where we will have a similar webinar, and we will look into the opportunities for organizing regionalizations and compartmentalizations in the EU in the context of fast disease control. And there we are also looking at international examples which can be used to provide more guidance within the EU to establish these structures. And then later on this year, in June, we are looking at organizing a simulation exercise, a workshop, to continue on and look at the criteria for emergency vaccination. So that's what we are looking at for now, and then we'll continue in the second half of this year with more activities. So thank you all. Thanks very much for your contributions. It was really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, Tiziano, Elena, Filippo. Thank you for the audience for being with us, for the questions, and hope to meet you all again on the 6th of May at the next webinar of this public-private partnership initiative for anticipating fast disease outbreaks. Have a nice day, have a nice evening, and see you again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Koen.
Bye.